Welcome back. This is your math tutor Naresh, and this is the third tutorial on common factoring. So in this tutorial we're doing more practice questions, so let's get started. So the first question is, we're given the common factor, so 3t times a plus b, and then plus 7 times a plus b. So common factor this, that would be the question, and the first thing you want to do is always common factor. So here, if it doesn't seem like that, this could be a common factoring type of question because of the a plus b or the brackets, or it just looks complex to you, right? What we can do is we can say let a plus b be z. So I'll spend some more time on this, doing it this way. So if we let this bracket a plus b be represented by some other variable, so z in this case, so then this question really becomes 3tz, because this is now z, and then plus I have 7z because a plus b is now z, right? So here now we can clearly see, that the common factor is a z, right? 3 is not common because 3 and 7, they don't go into each other. There isn't a number that divides into 3 and 7 at the same time. And t is not common, right? So the only common factor here is z. And then, so z times what gives me 3tz? Or in other words, from 3tz, we pulled out a factor of z. What's the other factor? The remaining factor is 3t. And now for the second term, so z times 7 will give me 7z, right? In other words, from 7z I pulled out a factor of z. So what's the other factor? Well, the other factor is 7, right? So this is the answer we get. So here this was not so hard. So what's making this question hard is the lengthy expression of a plus b in the bracket, right? So now let's do the original question the way it's presented to us. So 3t, I'm going to copy the question again, times a plus b plus 7 times a plus b. So what you need to do is learn to recognize that a plus b, okay, first of all, that there are two terms. So 3t times a plus b, that's one term. And by plus, this is the second term, right? So 7 times a plus b, this whole thing is one term. So we have one term and we have a second term, and the operation is that of addition between these two terms, right? So learn to recognize that this bracket, a plus b, is common in both of these terms. So then we say, okay, so we will take out the bracket, which is common to both terms. And then what I can do is, I can use square brackets, or I can use some other forms of brackets to write the remaining factors. So from the first term, I've pulled out a factor of a plus b. The other factor that I'm left with is a factor of 3t. So that's the missing factor. So that's 3t. And now for the second term, right, so from this whole term, I've taken out a factor of a plus b. I'm left with a factor of 7. So that's the missing factor, right? So a plus b times 7 will give me that. Okay, so I hope you really grasp the concept here, right? So now if we wanted to do it the long way, so I could say, okay, here's my first term, so 3t times a plus b. I can divide it by my common factor. Common factor is a plus b, and then simplify this. So these cancel, I'm left with a factor of 3t. So that's how I get 3t here. To get the second term here, so start with the second term in the original question. So 7 times a plus b, divide by the common factor, so that's a plus b, and now these cancel out, and I'm just left with 7, and that's how I get 7 there. Okay, so I'm going to do some more questions where a bracket is common, so that you become comfortable with it. Okay. Okay, so question 1b. So 5 times x minus 1 plus 2x times x minus 1. Okay, so now can you recognize that x minus 1 is a common factor? So first of all, we have two terms, right? So 5 times x minus 1 is one term, 2x times x minus 1 is the second term, and the operation is that of addition. So the bracket x minus 1 appears in both as a factor, so that is common. So common factor is x minus 1. So what are the remaining factors? So from the first term, you pull out a factor of x minus 1. The other factor is factor of 5. And then for the second term, so you pull out factor of x minus 1, you're left with a factor of 2x. And that is what goes here. So that's the answer there. So let's look at 1c. So 3x times x minus 5 minus 7 times x minus 5. Okay, so again here we have two terms. So this is the first term, this is the second term. The operation is that of subtraction. So x minus 5 is the common factor because it appears as a factor in both terms, right? So from here you pull out a factor of x minus 5. The other factor is 3x. And here you pull out a factor of x minus 5. You're left with the other factor of 7. And because it's minus, it's going to be minus. Okay. And now let's look at number D. So 4m times x plus y plus x plus y. So this question here, it may look a little odd to you because of the plus x plus y. But remember, the reason it's probably looking different is because there isn't a number here, right? So, but that number is always there. If there is no number, 1 is always a factor, right? So now we have two terms. It's just like any of the questions we've done previously. So x plus y is common. So x plus y is our common factor. And then, so from here, we pull out this factor. The other factor is 4m. From here, we pull out x plus y as a factor. The other factor is 1. Remember, it's very important to write 1 here. You can't forget. You can't say, well, there's nothing left, so I'm just going to put 0, right? That's not right. So that would be wrong. So yes, you still need to put a factor of 1. And this is the correct answer. So this 1 is very important. If you leave it out, you won't get full marks because that's not the right answer. Okay. So now we'll look at 1e. So 2a times m minus n minus m minus n in brackets. Okay, so again, same thing here. So remember, we can put a factor of 1 here. So m minus 1 is common bracket, so that's our common factor, m minus n. So from this, we pull out factor of m minus 1, n. The other factor, the remaining factor is 2a, so that is what goes in here. From here, we pull out a factor of m minus n, the whole bracket. We're left with a factor of negative 1, right? So again, by the same token talked about in the previous question, this minus 1 is very important. You can't leave it out. You can't say I'm left with a factor of 1 or nothing, and it doesn't matter. It does matter. You're left with a factor of 1, and it's very important to put the 1 there. In this case, it's negative 1 because of this minus. Okay? So remember this question. Alright, so next question, we have 4x times 2x minus y minus 3 times 2x minus y. So again, now you got the pattern. So the common factor is 2x minus y. So we go 2x minus y, pull it out, and then the remaining factors, From this, the remaining factor is 4x. And from here, the remaining factor is minus 3. Right? So if you are not sure, then you can always do it the long way. So you could take this term, divide by the common factor, and you're left with 4x. Right? So take this, divide by this, so these cancel, you're left with negative 3. So let's look at question G. X plus 3, the whole thing squared, minus 2 times x plus 3. Okay, so this looks a little weird, right? So common factoring, huh? What? Okay, so we know that we have x plus 3. So first of all, this is the first term, this is the second term, and the operation is subtraction. So we have x plus 3 bracket, which is appearing in both terms, so that's common. Now maybe it's worthwhile doing this by substitution. So what I'm going to do is say this. Okay, so I'm going to say let x plus 3 be y. Okay, so then I will replace it. So x plus 3 is now my y. So this becomes y. The exponent is 2 minus 2, and then this whole bracket is y. Right? So factor this. So here y is common, and remember we said we always take out the lowest exponent. So we'll take out the lowest exponent, y to the 1. So what are we left with? Y times what gives me y squared? It's y. Y times what will give me negative 2y? Negative 2. Right? So now I'm going to say, okay, keep this in your mind, and now let's work with the original question. Okay? So if you were given this, this is how you would answer it. Right? So now we don't need to visually replace x plus 3 by y to write this and then work it out. We can actually do that with the original question. So what I would do is I would now say, okay, what's common? The bracket is common, right? So this bracket has an exponent of 2 and this bracket has an exponent of 1. So I'm going to pull out the bracket x plus 3, and my rules say you always take out the lowest exponent, right? So here I'm going to use square brackets because I don't know what kind of things or terms I'm going to end up with inside the bracket, right? So here x plus 3 times what will give me x plus 3, the whole thing raised to the exponent 2? Well, it'll be x plus 3 to the 1, right? X plus 3 to the 1, because now we have same basis. When you multiply, you add the exponents, right? And what about in the second? Well, I've already pulled out this factor, x plus 3 to the 1. I'm left with a factor of minus 2. All right, so this is the reason why I chose square brackets, because inside I ended up with parentheses, right? So you don't know what you're going to end up with. If you're not sure, then just use square brackets. Now I can simplify this further. I can say, okay, x plus 3, so that's that. I don't need the 1. And now I don't need these square brackets. I can just use this. So this is x plus 3. I don't need the bracket to the 1. And then we have minus 2, right? I can go one step further and I can simplify this. So this becomes, not sure if you'll be able to see this, but this will become x plus 3 times x plus 1, right? So I can combine 3 and 2. 3 take away 2 is 1. So this simplifies to x plus 1. So that's the final answer. So I hope you like this question. Okay, I'm going to erase it. So I think I'm pretty much done with all the examples that I want to show you. Maybe I can show you a couple more. So let's skip to, let's move to question H. So m times x squared minus x minus 1, okay, plus 3 times x squared minus x minus 1. Okay, so common factoring. Well, we have two terms, first term, second term. and the operation is addition, but what I see is we have a common bracket appearing in both. So our common factor is x squared minus x minus 1. So this whole bracket is our common factor. And what am I left with? So from here you pulled out this factor, now you're left with this factor, which is m. And here from this whole thing you pulled out a factor of x squared minus x minus 1, you're left with this other factor of 3. So that's the answer there. Okay. And now let's do last question, I. So we have 7q times x minus 1 minus x minus y. So this is x minus y. Okay, actually this is y. So 7q times x minus y minus x minus y. So again, I'm going to put 1 here, just so that I'm very clear. So the common factor is the bracket x minus y, and then I'm left with 7q minus 1. So that's the end of that. So I'm done with all the questions that I wanted to show you. But there's one other thing that I want to show you, or maybe give you a little proof of why we take out the lowest exponent when we common factor. So let's say if I'm given this, x to the 5 minus 6x squared. So remember here, common factor is x squared. We take out the lowest exponent. And the answer here is x squared times what gives me x to the 5, x to the 3, minus we have 6, right? So that's the answer. That's the common factoring part. The question is now, why do we take out the lowest exponent? So can you elaborate on that? Can you prove, can you show me that? Okay, so let's see if we can prove that. So we have x to the 5 minus 6x squared. So I'm going to rewrite this using my exponent definition. So x to the 5, it means multiply x 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minus 6 times x times x, right? So now remember, in here I only have 2 x's. So that means that's all that I can pull out, right? So from this I can only pull out 2 x's, and this term I have 5 x's. So this is what I'm going to pull out. So that's my common factor, x times x. Right, so I pull that out, and then what I'm left with inside is now the 3 x's, and here I'm left with minus 6. Right, so this is x squared, and this is x to the 3 minus 6. Right, so that's x squared, and that's x to the 3 minus 6. So this is sort of the proof why we pull out the lowest exponent. Right, so if I pulled out x to the, let's say, 5, there aren't enough x's in this term to pull out 5 x's. So that's the reason why we take out the lowest exponent. So I'm going to wrap up the tutorial here on common factoring. I hope you found the 3 tutorials on common factoring useful. If you did, please like or subscribe, and thank you for watching. We'll see each other in the next video. And once again, thank you for watching.